Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be doing my third and last rebuild before the end of Champs. After that we'll probably do a couple more before Ascension and then let that play out so I know what players are available and whatnot. But regardless, this should be a very interesting rebuild for Bleed, who I think mostly people believe that they need to just blow this roster up. They just announced like all the players that they were going to be removing. I'm not going to follow that exactly. Usually I do, uh, and then also make a couple other changes. But honestly, I can't. There's one player I can't remove here, so I will not be doing it. Uh, maybe it'll change by the time we get to after Ascension rebuilds, but I don't know. We'll talk about that during the video. But if you guys enjoy, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. Got a lot of content coming up in terms of post champions content, like season recap stuff, everything like that. All these rebuild videos during the off season, maybe some other kind of videos like that. I also have a second channel where I do like premiere guides, with just like a bunch of basic information about how to play certain maps. So if you're interested in that, I'll try to add a link in the description if I remember. And I think that's it for the intro here. So let's get right into it. So we'll start off with their yearly recap, where they won Pacific Ascension in 2023, which was very impressive. I think with the clear amount of money spent on this roster, I think that should have been expected, honestly. Especially with a player like Scary in the team, I think you'd be expected to win the tournament at least. But they had to replace Juicy and Neff, which was kind of out of their control. Like Juicy was 17, so he wouldn't be able to play in Tier 1. And then I think Neff had like military stuff that he had to do, but then immediately went to play in China, so I don't know how that worked. But regardless, uh, I don't know enough about it, so I'm not going to speak on it too much. And then they went 10th, 11th at kickoff, went 0-2, and just immediately went out against like Global and I don't remember who the other team was. I think it was T1. Yeah, it was Global and T1, which was certainly some losses. I mean, that was some of the worst Valorant I ever watched at kickoff. So if that puts into perspective how bad this team was, that they didn't get a ton better since then, I think you'll understand. I don't get how they played 6 games in stage one. I feel like this is wrong, but they went 1-5 in stage one, not good. Only win against DFM, I believe, and then 0-4 in stage two as well. So yeah, it's because they had the super week. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, and 4. Okay, that is right. But yeah, just not a good year for this team. And I think you're really looking to make significant improvements to kind of keep this franchise slot, which we'll talk about right here. Which is my goal for the roster, is just to keep their slot into 2025 and just be good enough to do that. And then you can make further improvements going into 2026, I think. So now we get onto the players that we will be removing here. And I think the only difference from real life is that we're removing Zest, or we're removing CrazyGuy instead of Zest, who I think is just going to leave in real life just to go to a better team, because he doesn't want to play for Bleed anymore, which is very fair. Um, so I'm not going to get too into any of these players since we have to talk about them individually in a little bit. But I don't think outside of Darion, any of these guys really showed anything last year. I think Retla was fine. Um, but Ye was better than he was on DSG. Showed more flexibility, but just not playing the right role still, I don't think. Darion made a role swap because they made roster moves to make him role swap, which made no sense to me. And then CrazyGuy just was not built for IGLing at the tier 1 level. All things we'll get into a little bit deeper in a second. So we'll start with Ye, who I don't really want to talk about this too much because it's just so well documented. Um, but yeah, I don't need to explain this too much. He was not good for this team. He kind of stepped down at the end of the year. I did kind of want to talk about it a little bit, just because, again, it's such a popular thing to talk about, and I do think there is a future for Ye in the game. And it would be in this role like Cryo played last year, like Demon 1 played in 2023. Um, He could also just play like a pure sentinel role, but I think just keeping him on the jet and the op, where he actually didn't look terrible last year. I think in a system where maybe like an EG-esque system or like 100 Thieves last year, I think in a system like that, I think he could really shine and be a pretty good player. But I just don't see a world where he plays Jet and Raze and some Neon now, and he's actually good. Like he needs to play a different role that isn't the duelist on Raze and Neon maps. Is pretty much what I'm saying. I don't know if he'd be a good Omen player. I think Astra Brim. I think he could be good. Maybe some Sentinel as well. Um, but other than that, I don't know. I didn't like them trying to play him on the Neon. I thought that was really bad. I thought the Raze was good at moments, and man, the Sky when he played Sky on Lotus at kickoff, that was just bad. I thought the Viper was fine, other than the like no fragging power. I thought the util was fine from him in that role. But yeah, just a player that needs to have like a year in tier two where he just plays the game. Like he just needs to play and improve, and then he can work his way back to a tier one level. But I don't know if he's going to be able to do that. And now we have Darion, who I think was the player that showed the most out of any of the bleed players not named Scary or Zest this year. Um, he just he made a role swap that they didn't need to make. Like they could have just picked up a flex player instead of making Darion switch over into a role that he really wasn't comfortable on. Like it didn't seem like he was the best at playing the duelist. Like I thought his jet was good, but his raise was not. Like I thought his sentinel play last year during their ascension run was really, really, really good, and he was going to be really good this year. But then they swapped him over for no reason, and just kind of ruined him a little bit this year. I think he still could be a good player, but again, this team just needs to win next year. So having a player like Darion, if he does suck on Sentinel again next year, then you're in a lot of trouble. But yeah, I still think could be a solid player. Just want to see him prove it in tier two or for another team. Then Retla, another player that I don't think I need to spend a ton of time on. Just a player that was fine for this team, wasn't bad in any game really. Like I don't think there was a game from him that stands out like, oh my god, this guy's terrible and needs to be cut. But I also don't think there's a game that was like good from him. Like he had like I looked at the stats and he was like barely positive or barely negative in every game. Like -2. Let me just click through these games. -6, which is not ideal, but that's against Gen G. So -3, +4, 0 difference against DRX. And we'll do one more. This one +2. So like, obviously stats aren't everything. I don't rate stats pretty much at all, but I think that does actually sum up kind of what his year was, where he was just kind of meh and never really like was that much better than anybody he was playing against. Like against T1, I'd say Sai is better. Obviously, Meteor's better. Blaze King's better from Global. Wild Oreo is better from Seeker. I think he'd be better than Vash, obviously. He's better than, or whoever was playing Sentinel for DRX, Foxy at this time, I think is better, or at least offers more upside. And I think that's what you need from a player in this role. Like, if he was this team's IGL, like if he was calling and had these stats and was just like this fine, it'd be like Boostio, where it's like, yeah, I really like that for my IGL. But from an actual player, I think you need, especially a Sentinel player, I think you need a lot more upside and a player that could potentially be a star for you. And then last up here, we have CrazyGuy, who, I mean, in terms of how this team was constructed or like how their game plans looked within the game, especially at the beginning of the year when he was on the roster during kickoff, you'd have to say he's one of the worst IGLs I've ever seen in terms of just specifically at a tier one level, at least. Um, especially his defensive calling. Some of the setups that they were running during kickoff were so bad. And I think he looked fine last year, but I think a lot of it was just players being a lot better. And then once the players stayed the same, going to like against tier one competition rather than tier two competition, the team kind of fell apart. Obviously, it wasn't the same team, and I don't know. I don't know if they made upgrades or not during the offseason. I think it was kind of side grading a little bit. And yeah, I don't know. I just think he's an okay individual player, and he would look better if he didn't have to IGL. And I think that'd probably be the role that he would end up playing. If Bleed doesn't get like he's apparently staying on this roster next year. If Bleed doesn't get a different IGL, they are getting demoted next year, and I don't care who else they get on this roster. I don't care if they bring back the old Optic roster and have CrazyGuy instead of FNS, like, and everybody playing at the level that they did during Optic. It's just not happening. Like, he's just not it. And yeah, we're gonna have to just let him go down back down to tier two and prove himself, hopefully as a non-IGL player. All right, so now moving on to what roles we need. And I think there's going to be one big thing that people won't expect here. But we need a duelist, we need a smokes player, and then we need a flex player, and one of them has to be an IGL. Now, you're probably thinking, wait, we have Scary. Why do we need a smokes player? I'm going to be transitioning him over to Sentinel. I think he's a very similar smokes player to what Marved is/was. And I think, at least in this current meta, that kind of player fits better on the Sentinel role rather than the duelist, or not the smokes role. So we're going to be getting an also very good smokes player in here and transitioning Scary over to the Sentinel role for that reason. So just wanted that to be addressed before the ending, because I think in one of the other ones I made a role swap and didn't talk about it until the end. So yeah. Then, so for available duelists, we have Juicy, Famous, Vera. Two of those are from the same team, but I think three excellent players. Do you mean to move on? I don't want to spoil anything. For Smokes, you have DOS9 and Dubstep. I haven't gotten into a ton of Smokes players yet for APAC teams, but out of what I've watched, those two guys are very good. For Flex players, you got Sushi Boys, Shiro, and Crystal. Crystal can be an IGL, but I thought he was also very good when I watched him. If he ascends in China, then he won't end up being on any team, but he might sneak his way onto some team as a flex IGL, or just a flex, if he does not. And then for IGLs, you have Carpe, who I think got released by T1 officially, but also will get cut by T1 in this world. Styron and Yes I Can, which I think is a hilarious name, but also a very good player. So, yeah. So we'll start here with our duelist player, Juicy, who comes up from Bleed's affiliate team in DSG, and has the like chemistry with Scary. Played on that roster in Ascension. I think he's very good. I think Vera is also very good on that DSG team, and it's really close between the two. So I ended up just going with Juicy, just because I think that was the plan when they partnered with DSG, was to get Juicy back to play this duelist role, where I think he is very good. I think he can play both of the main duelists. He plays a bit of ISO, a bit of Reyna. He doesn't play a ton of Neon as far as I know. Let me check his VLR. He's played it. He's played a bunch of Yoru recently as well. So he's fairly flexible on this duelist role, which you like to see. He's played a little bit of some other stuff like Chamber, some KO, some Phoenix, a little bit of Initiator outside of that, but nothing huge. Just mainly a duelist player and a very young player at that. So, yeah, a lot of room to grow here. Then we have Mind Freak, who will get dropped from Paper X in this world. I kind of regret doing Bleed first now, now that he ended up being on this team, but he did get dropped from Paper X. And I think he's been nothing less than an elite player regionally, honestly. He's been like one of the best players in Pacific when they play regionally. Now, when he gets to international tournaments, when he gets into the big pressure games against the best teams, he really, really struggles in those games sometimes. He has tournaments where he just cannot play the game. And I think he's a vocal player that could help out the new IGL. So yeah, the reason we got him specifically for that like middle point is just because this team needs to succeed regional. That's all they need to do for this team. Maybe next year we'll start thinking about maybe making international tournaments and stuff. But right now, this team needs to just succeed regionally and keep this not roster spot, this BCT spot. That's what I was saying. Then we do pick up Carpe here. Uh, Also dropped from T1 in this world, might have also been dropped from T1 in real life. They posted a video like let me look this up real quick. They posted a weird video the other day. T1 Valorant. I'm looking on Twitter. There we go. Yeah, it was like time to say goodbye, and then it was a video of like their whole roster. So I hope they don't drop the whole roster because that would be kind of dumb, in my opinion. Um, but yeah, I think Carpe is a very, very good player. Um, in terms of like individual play, I think he was decent, and I think he was decent at calling. Kind of fell off towards the end of when he was IGLing on T1, but their system in terms of like Excurate trying to take too many lurk timings or playing too aggressive or whatever, um, ended up getting him swapped off that role, and then he was not playing well individually, and then and a bunch of other stuff. I don't know. That's what I was trying to say. He also speaks Korean and English, so if Zest is struggling with some of the English stuff, he can translate as the IGL, which I think is good. And just plays a lot of agents. He plays like I think every initiator except maybe Breach, and he might have played that this year. Yeah, he plays Sky, Gecko, Sova, Fade. He does play Breach. He's played some Smokes as well, and Astra and Brim. I think he can play Omen. He can play Chamber. Yeah, he can play pretty much anything. Uh, in terms of the initiator and the Smokes roles. So that's a very nice player to have. Obviously, he won't need to play the Smokes that much, but it's just nice to have, obviously. And yeah, so that is our last edition, and this will be our final roster. We have Juicy on the Duelist, Carpe on the Flex / IGL, Zest being our initiator, Mind Freak being our Smokes player, and then Scary for Sentinel. I think this team genuinely has a chance, like, to do something in terms of making international events. Maybe not doing anything at those events, but this lineup looks really good. As long as Juicy can be really good and Carpe can kind of be a fine IGL, like good enough within Pacific, I think this team would genuinely be really good because they have like three of the best players in Pacific and Zest, Mind Freak, and Scary. So yeah, let me know what you guys think of this roster in the comments below, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.